All right, let's get into some UFC 207. I feel like I'm going to spend a long time on this, but I have a couple bullet points, and I'm going to do my best not to. Let's start off with the main event and get that out of the way, which was Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunes. And it was, first off, it was sad. It was kind of like hard to watch, like sad. Like I like Amanda Nunes, but you kind of sort of want Ronda, or at least for me personally, want Ronda to come back and win. I guess, I was rooting for her. I was rooting for Ronda, and it was. I at least wanted like a competitive fight, and she, for those of you that don't know, that didn't watch UFC 207, Ronda got beat handily by Amanda Nunes, standing up, striking within 48 seconds of the very first round. And it was sad just to see her like that because, she's been on a long time hiatus. She was out for 13 months, if I'm not mistaken, or 400 and something days, something like that. And she lost in spectacular fashion to Holly Holm the last time we saw her, to that iconic kick to the head that knocked her out. And that was her first loss ever. And after that, she was like on Ellen and talking about committing suicide, which her father, by the way, committed suicide, and she was depressed, and she's always had like a love-hate relationship with the media. Like, the media made her who she is, you know what I mean? Like, covering her and bigging her up and stuff like that. And the UFC putting that entire machine of promotion behind her. But she's always kind of been like standoffish and not all the time, but at times she has been. And she kind of played towards like the heel type of persona, like people like love to hate her type of thing. But she's the fucking man, for lack of a better term. She literally created the fucking division. Like, literally. There's an interview with Dana White, the president of the UFC, which is the face of the UFC, which is the mouthpiece of the UFC. Still now, even though he has much less, I guess, like after the $4 billion sale of the company, he has his stake in it. He still stayed on as president, but it's like not his baby anymore. You know what I mean? Like, he's the one that found the UFC, found that the guy that initially had the UFC was the one to sell it. His boys and grew up with the Fertitta brothers, which own station casinos, and these millionaire cats that got into it with him and said, hey, you know what, fuck it, it's a good idea, let's do it. And they bought the UFC, and I forget for how much it was, if it was like $2 million or something like that. And they pumped money into it and into it and into it. And they were like in I want to say $100 million hole, or maybe it was a $10 million hole, and I'm exaggerating, but they were like losing money. Like, it wasn't a smart business decision at that point to keep it going. But obviously it panned out because it was the fastest growing sport in history, and they sold it for $4 billion. But yeah, Dana stayed on, and there's a famous, you guys could YouTube it. If I remember, I'll put it in the episode notes, but there's a famous like quick TMZ style interview when he's like walking out of a building that they ask him, hey Dana, when are we ever gonna when are we gonna see women in the UFC, like fighting in the UFC? And he said never. Like it was like he was against it. It was like, what? Why are we gonna waste our time and energy with that? And then Ronda Rousey came along and literally became the face of the UFC before Conor McGregor, that most casual fans like know of because of him, know of the UFC because of him. There was Ronda Rousey, and she was the face and the biggest draw of the UFC. Now, I say all that like to kind of like echo the sentiments of Ariel Helwani, which is the #1 MMA journalist, bar none. Something that he said, which hit close to home for me, which was like all these journalists now, like big media and big money is like getting into the UFC business or the MMA business, and you have these like guys that normally do like color commentary for like NFL games and on Fox and ESPN and stuff like that they don't know dick about MMA. And by the way, I'm not saying that I do, but I've been a fan from way back when. And for them to, like, it's kind of like disrespectful, and at the same time it's like, dude, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about when they say like things like, oh, she just wasn't ready, she shouldn't have come back, and stuff like that about like Ronda Rousey, coming from like just like mouthpieces like that, you know, that are just like spouting talking points and like mispronouncing names of fighters, and then saying, you know, calling her, instead of Ronda Rousey, calling her like Misha Tate, you know what I mean? Just like complete, like you're reading a script, like you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, leave this to like the professionals, the professional journalists of it. So first off, like, anybody who's listening to this, like, knock all those folks off, like, your radar, your like intake of information regarding the situation, and just don't get it twisted. Like, I just want to point out how Ronda could literally never fight again, or fight, you know, 20 fights in a row from here for the next, you know, 20 years or whatever, 10 years, and lose every single one, and she still will be like a Hall of Famer because of what she did. You know, she was the first one like trailblazing this shit, and to the levels that she did it. Let me put it in perspective a little bit, because it's not, I hear a lot of people say also like, oh, you know, she wasn't the best, she was just first. And she was first, but she was the fucking best. She was, and could still be up there with a different game plan, but I'll get to that in a bit. Let me read you her record. She's, first of all, she's 12-2 in the UFC, like Amanda Nunes. Just to give a little context to the 12-2, the current champion Amanda Nunes is 14-4. You have to look at how Rousey became Rousey, why she was being called like the best ever and the Mike Tyson of MMA, of women's MMA. She won she won 2 fights in a row, her first 2 fights in Strikeforce, which is, I don't think Strikeforce is around anymore. I believe the UFC bought it up along with like a bunch of other like smaller organizations, but Strikeforce is a smaller organization that the UFC bought. And it could be that in the purchase of Strikeforce, that's when Ronda came over to the UFC. But it could be that the UFC just created a division for Ronda and then just like farmed her out of Strikeforce. Strikeforce, you know, like all those little organizations, it's like they want to be in the UFC. So fighters, you know, once they do good in those organizations, they go into, you know, it's like the AAA of fucking MMA. In the MMA world, they go into the UFC. So she wins 2 fights in a row. Then in her third fight in Strikeforce, she fights and beats Misha Tate for the title. And then she defends the title in Strikeforce. And then her next fight is for the title in the UFC, coming in as a Strikeforce champion. She wins the title in the UFC, defends it the second fight in the UFC against Misha Tate, which is her like arch nemesis. Like, they fought 3 times, and Misha Tate's the only one that, like, before her 2 losses, gave her any comp whatsoever. Then after that, she won 4 more fights in a row. So she won 6 fights straight in a row in the UFC. She won 4 fights before that in Strikeforce. So she was 10-0. And then she had the epic loss to Holly Holm, which I mentioned before earlier. And then now in UFC 207, her loss to Amanda Nunes. Something very necessary to highlight, though, is let me tell you guys how she won each and every one of these fights. And I'm going to read them off. Her first fight ever, a round 1 submission. Second fight, a round 1 submission. Third fight, a round 1 submission. Fourth fight, a round 1 submission. None of these girls could get out of the first round with her. Fifth fight, a round 1 submission. Sixth fight, a round 3 submission. That's the one with Misha Tate, that Misha Tate took her to the 3rd round. And it was a scrappy fight, I remember that. The next fight after that, round 1 KO. The next fight after that, another round 1 KO. The next fight after that, a round 1 submission. The next fight after that, a round 1 KO. Knockout. And then her 2 losses came. So don't get it twisted. Like, Ronda Rousey is a Hall of Famer. And much respect to her, no matter what. And like financially, she's fine. She was one of the highest paid athletes in the UFC. And she's worth, I think, like 9-10 million or something like that. She did a couple movies. Her acting sucks, by the way, but she did a couple movies, which was a large part of the criticism. Like, she was doing too much stuff, like movies, commercials, and all the demands, the demands of the UFC media and stuff like that, which played into what people were, I guess, saying was the reason for her loss against Holly Holm, the first one, which you can't really say now because she did absolutely no fucking media for the last one, which I'm gonna get to. Yeah, I just want to be clear on all that. So, much respect to Ronda Rousey. You were and are a great fighter, one of the greatest ever, and I always look forward to each and every one of your fights. So, since of course you listen to this podcast, thank you. Now, all the praise aside, here's the stuff that I don't like, and just how I feel about certain other things. After Ronda's loss first off, she has like that kind of like shitty attitude that I mentioned before that turns a lot of people off. It turns me off to some degree. And it's kind of like I like respect her and like as a fighter and stuff like that, but the sportsmanship is not there. It's kind of like Kobe Bryant is my favorite basketball player, right? And everybody's like, oh, Kobe's a dick and he's an asshole and stuff like that. And they say similar things about Ronda Rousey. And it's like, yeah, I don't necessarily want to chill with a guy or fucking play on the same team as him. Like, I'd kill myself if I played on the same team as a guy like that. But his passion, his dedication, his will to put it all on the line, his leadership, that shit I admire. Like, that's the stuff that always like drew me to Kobe. But all that other like being a dick and it's just always been like not necessary to me. Like, you can have like the good part without having the bad, or maybe those personal individuals can't. Like, maybe that's how they push themselves to like be great on the other side, to have that drive and stuff like that. They have to be a dick to like kind of like offsetters. I don't know, maybe some weird psychological shit like that is going on in Kobe's head and Ronda's and people that act that way. But I just don't think it's necessary to. It's not. They're not mutually exclusive. But that's something that I never liked about Ronda. That came out a lot in the build up to this fight because. And this is one of the things that I really didn't like, is that she did absolutely zero media. Like, it's like mandatory in every UFC fighter's contract that they always have to do like media events and do a public workout, the pre-fight press conference and the weigh-ins and answer a few questions, and then the post-fight, like all that shit, all the, promote the fucking fight. That's how they sell the pay-per-views. That's how they make money. So much so that fighters like, for example, Conor McGregor, who is inarguably, however you say it, the biggest athlete for the UFC. Conor McGregor sold in, I think it was either the past year or 2 years, more pay-per-view sales than any other UFC card. For the cards that he's been on have sold more pay-per-views than any other UFC event for the year combined, or some shit like that. Some like stat that he's by far like staunched like every other UFC athlete in terms of being a draw. Hence him telling the UFC openly in a post-fight press conference after his last victory that he wants like ownership stake in the company and stuff like that, which it's like kind of doesn't make sense because he gets a percentage of the pay-per-views that he's on. That's how the UFC fighters make a boatload of their money. For example, like Ronda Rousey was paid $3 million for this fight, but she should probably make more than that or close to that, just in her pay-per-view bonus like percentage. Amanda Nunes also, which is weird. Amanda Nunes won, but she made like $200,000 or some shit like that from the UFC. But it's people were watching for Ronda anyway, or most people. like the casual fans and shit. So Ronda was the first fighter that had supposedly had some weird fucking clause in her contract, a one-time thing that she wrote into it beforehand, saying that the only way she would come back and take this fight was if she didn't have to do any media obligations. So we literally saw 0 out of Ronda, except for literally I think like 30 seconds at the weigh-in when she went and she weighed in. People like snap pictures, tried to ask her questions. She went on stage and walked off. The face-off also between her and Nunes, the first face-off, when they announced the actual fight was going to happen, she walked on stage, faced off, took a picture with Nunes, and walked off stage right after. And then from like a, I guess you call it like a business or management perspective, the company that bought the UFC, like the conglomerate, WME, also manages Ronda Rousey. So people are saying that that's like kind of like favoritism type shit, or like this weird gray area situation. That's why she got that. But regardless of what, it's like you've been out of the game for 13 months. You have fans that love you, fans, fans, anti-fans, whatever you want to call them, that hate you. She's not like a limelight type of girl, which is understandable. But every other one of your peers has to go through this. It's part of it. It's part. You've done it your entire career. So I didn't like that she kind of like got away with that, or kind of like, I don't know, it like didn't sit well with me. Like, it wasn't cool, like I'm a big believer in doing what you got to do, whether sometimes you get the shorter end of the stick, sometimes you don't, but do what you got to do. And that was part of it. Then on the flip side, like all the attention, all the hype, and largely rightfully so from a, I guess, like a marketing standpoint, it made sense to, like, all the hype, all the commercials, all the posters, everything was heavy Ronda Rousey. Like, nobody knew it was like Ronda Rousey versus some other chick. And rightfully so, in the sense of people were nostalgic. They wanted to see Ronda again. It's been over a year. And a lot of people were like, was it a fluke? Was it a lucky kick? Was it when Holly won? Was, what I mean? Like, that was like part of the conversation. What has she been doing over the past 13 months and nobody's heard a peep from her? And besides like the Ellen thing, and maybe like on Conan, I think she went on and stuff like that. And we barely, she hasn't done like MMA media too much. And then all of a sudden she's back. Oh my God, Ronda. So from a marketing standpoint, they were like plating that shit up like crazy. But they completely neglected the current champion, which was Amanda Nunes, and didn't tell like her story, and which has like a very sellable, from a marketing standpoint, a very sellable life story, like a story arc, if you want to call it that. She's a openly lesbian fighter, and she's just a fucking, like, fighting wise, she's a beast. She beat Holly Holm. Oh, something else to say. There was like no stability within that division after Ronda lost the title. She defended the title. She won the title, then defended it. She had the title for 6 fights, so she won it, then defended it 5 times before her loss. That was a span of over 2 years, almost 3 years. And then when Holly won, then Holly lost the very next fight to Miesha Tate. Then Miesha Tate lost the very next fight to Amanda Nunes, and then Amanda Nunes just defended it for the first time against Ronda Rousey. So she's the only fighter in the history of the division to, after Ronda Rousey, to defend that title. So that's important to note. So as you can see, she's a talented fucking chick. So like from Amanda's point of view, which, this is not directly Ronda's fault, but indirectly, based on her actions of not wanting to do media and shit like that, is her fault. In the sense that Amanda Nunes gets shit on, she doesn't like get no love that comes along with, being the champion and promoting the fight and going around the world and like all that good shit. Because since Ronda didn't have to do it, she didn't have to do it. And she said herself in like some interviews that she did that she didn't mind because, you know, that meant more time for training, and you know, she's like shy anyway and not into all the media stuff, but like she has said, you know, but if I have to do it, I have to do it, and I would do it if the UFC asked me, but that she said she knew that it was going to be like that, and that's pretty much it. Ronda, by the way, like physically looked fucking phenomenal, better than she's ever looked, which leads to my next point, which is the coaching. She has this coach called Edmund Tartavan or something like that, which has a controversial not history in coaching. Well, I mean, he's been a coach from the get, right? So she has like the sense of like loyalty like towards him, but people including like her mother, which, you know, raised her and was a judo champion herself. Ronda was a judo. Oh, that's another thing. She was like in the fucking Olympics and won the bronze medal in the Olympics for judo. Like, people are saying pretty much that he's a shitty coach. Like, she got to where she's at, you know, on her like own strengths, and he's kind of been like going along for the ride, but he's not the coach like for her. And people put a lot of pressure after the Holly Holm loss for her to switch her camp, but she never did, and she stuck with the guy, Edmund Tartavan. And then after this fight, it's like, definitely, if you want to go on, you know, you got to switch your coach, because he's kind of, first of all, he's like a weird kind of character. I read up on him a little bit. He has like this checkered past with like 2 felonies for identity theft, and like he was like this ex-boxer, but he like embellished his record, and I don't know, some like weird checkered, like where there's smoke there's fire kind of like weird nonsense fuckery going on, which then it's like a question of her not character, but her, like, why do you have this dude around you? But long story short, with him, he's like touting himself as like this fucking like ill striking coach, ill boxing coach, but he's not. And like, Amanda Nunes is a legit striker. Like, she could fight like on her hands, right? So for the Holly fight, Holly Holm, going one fight back, I know I'm a little all over the place. Holly Holm, for example, is a decorated kickboxer, like world class, world titles and kickboxing leagues and shit like that. And Ronda's known for, like you saw from all the way that she won a lot of her fights that I read off, round 1 submission victories and a few KOs and TKOs, but round 1 submission victories by far. Her armbar, that's like her go-to. That's like her shit. And she kind of like with the Holly fight, which I think began the fight before when she fought Betch Correa, and Betch Correa was like said to be like a striker, and Ronda Rousey wanted to like beat her at her own game. I think there's like a little bit of like ego involved in that. She didn't want to just do what she normally does, which is, you know, take her to the ground and armbar her. Betch Correa was supposed to be this awesome striker, and Ronda Rousey knocked her out and won that way. She kind of tried to do the same thing with Holly Holm. She stood up with Holly Holm, and you can't play that with Holly Holm. Like, Betch Correa was like a striker, quote unquote, not quote unquote, but I mean, she strikes, but she was more supposedly like, she was just like stronger, or supposed to be stronger or whatever, but she's not like at a level of striking of like kickboxing like Holly Holm. And we saw that handle. She got played with. And she wasn't herself in that fight, and she abandoned what got her to the dance. You know what I mean? Like, she should have stuck to the game plan with Holly Holm of what was working, instead of like trying to like beat her at her own game. But again, who knows what's going on in her head? In my opinion, as a fan, it didn't look like her. It didn't look like the Ronda that we were used to, the dominating Ronda. And you kind of see her trying to like beat Holly at her own game. Then, you know, she's been supposedly Edmund Tartavan her coach has been putting in her that she's like this phenomenal striker. He has to like bring it out of her, etc., and sticking to a striking game plan, which for Amanda Nunes, against Amanda Nunes, is like even worse than if she did it against Holly Holm. And then Amanda Nunes, like Miesha Tate said, hits harder than any other girl in the division, and is more powerful than any other girl in the division, and can strike her balls off, and she has long ass arms. And Ronda had no business buying into whatever Edmund was telling her, and her own ego or anything. It's like if all Ronda does for the rest of her life is strike, it doesn't do any more like judo or anything like that, she can't get to the level of striking that Amanda Nunes is at, as long as Amanda Nunes maintains her level, continuing to on her. Like, you can't close the gap, basically, is what I'm saying. And conversely, Amanda Nunes wouldn't be able to touch Rousey if Rousey stuck to like a judo, get her to the ground, armbar approach, which is obviously easier said than done because you have to get through that barrage of punches to be able to do that. But that should have been the game plan, the mentality, the approach, at least, and you would have stood a chance. But instead, she kind of like tried standing with her, got rocked. As soon as she got rocked, she got, I think it was like a left jab and then a right cross, and that's it. After that first right cross, it was done. Then she tried like some weak ass takedown attempt that Amanda Nunes just like brushed off, and then just rocked her. 48 seconds later, she's done. And to her credit, though, she didn't get knocked down. Herb Dean did an awesome stoppage, but she showed a shitload of heart with that. And then afterwards, again, she walks out of the fucking ring same way she did with Holly Holm. She's probably devastated and fucked up and stuff like that. She's not the type, again, to like speak with the media too much, but that's where like that shitty sportsmanship, bad loser type of thing comes out, which nobody's going to respect her for. If she would have gotten on the mic and just said, I trained hard for this. I'm sorry I didn't do any of the pre-media shit, but I was trying to focus on this to see what I have to work on. I have more shit to work on, apparently. And hats off to Amanda Nunes. She's a great fighter. That's it. Everybody. She would have won over fucking America. Then Nunes gets on the mic, and this was kind of shitty, but I understand where the frustration was coming from with her, where she was saying, she pretty much said, I came here to put on a good show for you guys, stuff like, like that, the usual type of shit. And then she said that she's the champion, she's the new champion, she's there to stay, and forget about fucking Ronda Rousey already. And that was coming from that like place of frustration, you know what I mean? Like, fuck, all the attention's on this girl. I just demolished her in 48 seconds. And people were kind of like applauding her, but booing her. Some people were booing her, and and she was just like pissed off about it. But to Amanda, I would say, like, my advice would be, or what I would, not my advice because she's not listening to this, but only Rousey listens to the Spun Today podcast. But what I would like to see from Amanda is just keep fighting the way you fight, but don't take that like nasty fucking type of approach again. It's not necessary. You get more with honey than with vinegar, in my opinion, and especially in like this type of situation where fans, Rousey isn't really giving fans much to gravitate towards. You know what I mean? Rousey's did break her silence recently via social media, and she said she gave a J.K. Rowling quote, actually, from Harry Potter, which was, and I'm going to paraphrase it and butcher it at the same time. It was something to the effect of, and thus I hit rock, this is hitting rock bottom, but it's necessary in order to build a stronger foundation, or something like that. Which is cool if that's where her mind's at, like getting better, dusting yourself off and trying again. And I didn't want to go long with the whole Ronda Rousey thing, and I really, really long. So let's quickly speak about the other two fights that was of importance, at least to me, which was Dominic Cruz, who I was rooting for. He's one of my favorite fighters, and him versus Cody Garbrandt, Cody No Love, and Cody out Dominic Cruz. Cody was more elusive. He was more difficult to hit. Dominic Cruz got a gash on his head, I believe in like the second or third round or something like that. And real quick, in the round of fight, right at the end, when the Lioness Amanda Nunes won, she walked around and she had her hand like up to her lips, like shushing Ronda's. She walked around the whole ring like that, but she was like shushing Ronda's corner. The reason why she was doing that was because that coach Edmund was saying what a great boxing coach he's gonna be and stuff like that, or he is, and how Ronda was gonna like outstrike her or some shit like that. So she explained that she did that because she was like, this guy's putting in her head that she's a boxer, and she's not. She should have stuck to her game plan or whatever, and he's not a boxing coach, etc., etc. Anyway, back to Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz is up until this point and still known as like one of the greatest ever, one of the greatest fighters. He has now only 2 losses. His record is like impeccable. He had like 4 years layoff because he had like 2 knee surgeries, and some other surgery, and he came back and looked even better than he did before, and won the championship. And this kid Cody No Love came out of not nowhere, but Cody's been on a tear, but he was like unranked. He wasn't even like in the top 10 in the division, and he was fighting Dominic Cruz, and he looked phenomenal. He won probably 4 rounds out of the 5. Again, Dominic Cruz got like a gash over his forehead, over his eyebrow, from I believe a headbutt, but it could have been like strikes and shit like that. Obviously, he kind of like danced. There was a lot of animosity between the guys, so it was a fight that I was like looking forward to watching. He kind of like danced when Dominic Cruz like couldn't hit him. Like he dodged a few of his punches and then did like the robot or some shit, and then he wound up doing like a push up like in between, I don't know, like jabs and stuff like that. He was just unhittable, and he was accurate. He was poised. He was everything that everybody expected Dominic Cruz to be in the fight, and he was just a better fighter. And Dominic Cruz lost the belt to him. And just to show the like sportsmanship, like there was a lot of animosity between these guys. Like they talked a lot of shit to each other. Had some looked staged, but had some like behind the scenes like scuffles, and the teams talking shit to each other when they used to pass each other while doing interviews and stuff like that. And Cody just looked like a complete hothead, and Dominic was like poised the entire time. And then in the ring it was like the exact opposite. Now after the fight, Dominic did he lost with class, with grace, and he took on the post-fight press conference, answered each and every one of the questions, said that he gives respect to Cody, answered the questions regarding his game plan, stuff like that, didn't make any excuses, said that he went in with the right game plan, Cody was just better, and that he's definitely not out, he's still in the mix, and if he doesn't get the rematch right away, he understands, because TJ Dillashaw is due up for a rematch, and he was pretty much going to be the rematch with Dominic Cruz. TJ Dillashaw is the guy that Dominic Cruz beat for the title when he came back after the 4-year layoff, and it was like assumed that Dominic Cruz was going to win and then fight TJ Dillashaw again, which also fought on this card, which is the fight that I'm going to speak about next. But he just like took it like a champ, like he's a true champion, and that's like the type of like, that's what you want. That's what I want from a fucking champion. Even Conor McGregor talks the most shit out of everybody, in the hands down And he, even in his post-fight press conferences when he lost to Nate Diaz, he stayed in the ring. He took the mic. You know, he didn't walk out of the ring. He took the mic, answered Rogan's questions, did the post-fight press conference, gave all respect to Nate. You know, shook his hand, bowed to him. You know, the whole nine. Even dudes like that. And it's like that's a big part of it. That's what makes you, in my opinion, that distinguishes you between a great fighter and a great champion. And Dominic Cruz, with or without the belt, in my opinion, is a great champion. The next fight, which will round off my UFC talk, is TJ Dillashaw versus Lineker. And TJ Dillashaw looked amazing. Fucking amazing. TJ Dillashaw lost his belt after winning the belt from a guy who had it for like 10 years in the division. No, I'm lying. He had it for a long time, for years, but who hadn't lost in 10 years or some shit like that. But he had the belt after Dominic Cruz left hurt, and they made him like vacate the belt because Dominic Cruz had the belt before he left. Then Renan Barão had it. I don't know if somebody had it in between, but Renan Barão had it, and TJ Dillashaw beat him like handily twice in the first fight and the rematch. And then when Dominic Cruz came back, Dillashaw lost the belt in a very controversial decision. And since then, he's been itching to get a rematch. He hasn't gotten it, and now Cody won the belt in a surprise upset. And Cody and TJ Dillashaw are now, like, they have to be fighting next, because TJ Dillashaw looked amazing against Lineker, who most people were like, yo, he better not be like looking past Lineker, because Lineker could knock him the fuck out and it's gonna be a tough fight for him, etc., etc. He like dogged him, like easily beat him. And there's a pretty cool storyline too between Dillashaw and Cody, because they were both members of Team Alpha Male, and TJ Dillashaw was they controversially left like that camp to go with Dwayne Bang Ludwig, which is his I guess like his head coach, but he's like a striking coach under Dwayne's tutelage. Is that TJ became TJ and, you know, won the belt, etc. And there's always been like friction between like that between TJ and like Uriah Faber, which is the head of Team Alpha Male, and Cody is still in Team Alpha Male, and there's like friction there, you know what I mean? So the UFC could definitely market and play up that storyline for that fight, and I would definitely look forward to checking that out. God damn, I said I was going to try to make that fucking UFC talk short, and I went very long, longer than I even thought I would. So let's try to get through the rest of the stuff, folks.